Hey everybody, I'm Shane Ireland. Recently, I had the pleasure of visiting one of the grandfathers of modern American pipe making, and a good friend of mine, Jody Davis. I was able to visit him in his shop. While we were hanging out in the shop, naturally, I had some questions for him about sort of his start in pipe making, his general philosophy about it, and how his career has evolved and his pipe making has evolved in the many years that he's been in the business.
It all started. I was living in Nashville at the time and had been making pipes for a few years. And Todd Johnson, I believe, either had just moved to town, back to town because he was from there, or he something like that. And he had been to Tom Iltang's place and had learned how to do it. And so somehow he got a hold of some spoon bits for doing, tobacco chamber stuff. So there wasn't like a supplier back then. You had to make everything or have it made. So like to get that kind of stuff that was a big deal. It was really rare. And nobody in the US did it. And he was like, "Hey, I'm going on vacation for a couple of weeks. You want to borrow these bits?" Yeah, sure, And then he came by and dropped them off and kind of said, "Well, you just kind of do this." And like just kind of half told me like, okay. So then I just jumped in and started doing it. I think I was doing it kind of backwards too, actually, at first, but it worked out. So not long after that, I got some bits made or whatever. And then when I went to what really kind of solidified the whole thing is when I went and stayed with Lars for a little bit. And then, of course, that's how he does everything. So and his way was kind of crazy because, as you'll see here in a little bit, I'll glue these little pieces on, and I have a very fine point in my tailstock, and that gives you the direction and everything. Lars just kind of had this piece of wood that fit in his tailstock that came to a point, and he just kind of held it there. I'm like, how in the world do you ever? How do you make that work? Like I think I tried it there, and I ended up being okay, but I think I messed up like a mortise once, and then it was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. I don't know how you accurately do this like that, but of course he obviously did. And I don't know, not many still do it the same way. So, but yeah, so that's it. Kind of from Todd, kind of from Lars, kind of making it up as I was going along.
Now that we've heard a little bit from Jody, let's take a look at part of his pipe making process.
The very first thing we'll see Jody do here is select the piece of briar he'd like to work with. Whether he has a shape in mind and he's trying to find the block that will best work with that shape, or whether he's looking for inspiration, this is where it all begins. Now that the block is selected, we'll see Jody begin to sketch out the idea of the shape on the side. This is the profile of the shape. It'll serve as a template and a guideline while he does his initial shaping. Since he'll be drilling second and shaping first, he won't be married to this exact position in the block, but rather he'll be able to sort of move around with the grain, follow the grain, see what the wood has to offer, and even address any potential flaws that come up. Now that the idea of the shape is sketched on the block, we'll see him take to the French wheel. In the beginning on the French wheel, he'll be using a really aggressive grit. This will remove lots of material with each pass. As the shaping progresses, the details are refined. In this case, the teardrop shank on the fish shape. He has now moved to a finer grit wheel, which will remove less material and allows a little bit more control over the shaping. This is where things slow down a little bit and the shape is refined. And finally, the finest grit to remove the tool marks from the previous grits and to refine the shape until its final form. Spraying water on the stummel allows him to see the grain and allows him to make sure that he's following the grain according to the shape and maximizing. Here we see him drawing lines on the shape, This is sort of putting it into a cross section, which allows him to prepare it for drilling. The first step is drilling the mortise. This is all done freehand rather than the block being fixed into the machine. Now the airway. One more pass. Now that the airway and mortise are set and the pilot hole for the chamber is drilled, it's time to work on the chamber. This is done in several steps to ensure accuracy and to prevent any sort of charring. Briar is such a hard wood, and it can be hard on the tooling, taking several passes at larger and larger diameters, and then finally with the spoon bit to carve the profile of the finalized chamber. Here we see him facing off the end of the shank and preparing it for an accent. And now it's time to sandblast. The sandblasted finish is revealed after some time in the cabinet. And here we see the first coats of stain being applied.
I want to thank Jody for taking the time to sit down with us and give us a little bit of his lore and show us a little bit of his process. It was a pleasure as always. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.